The invisible trap, why most people stay broke even when they earn more. What if the biggest reason people never become financially free has nothing to do with how much money they make? Imagine two people, both earn the same salary, both live in the same city, both have the same opportunities. 10 years later, one quietly owns a home, has savings, sleeps peacefully at night. The other is trapped, living paycheck to paycheck, stressed every month, wondering where all the money went. How can two lives begin in almost exactly the same place and end so differently? Most people think they already know the answer. They earned more. They got lucky. They invested early. But what if every one of those answers is wrong? Because hidden inside Japan for more than a century, there has been a simple habit, no expensive software, no complicated spreadsheets, no secret investments, just paper, a pen, and 4 questions. Questions so ordinary, most people ignore them. Yet these questions have quietly transformed thousands of lives. This isn't just a budgeting system. It's a way of thinking, a way of seeing money, a way of seeing yourself. And by the end of this journey, you may discover that the greatest financial battle was never with your bank account. It was with your own mind. Because the real mystery isn't why some people become rich. The real mystery is why so many intelligent people stay broke. And the answer begins with a notebook. But before that notebook ever existed, something much bigger was already shaping our lives, something almost invisible, a force so common we rarely notice it anymore. Imagine waking up on a Friday morning, your salary arrives. For a brief moment, everything feels possible. The number on your screen looks reassuring. You promise yourself this month will be different. You'll save, you'll spend wisely, you'll finally get ahead. Then something happens. Coffee on the way to work, lunch with friends, a streaming subscription renews, a few online purchases, a delivery app because you're tired, a weekend outing, another small purchase that hardly seems worth thinking about. Days pass, then weeks. Suddenly, you check your account. The number has almost disappeared. Nothing dramatic happened. No emergency, no disaster, just hundreds of tiny decisions. Each one harmless. Each one forgettable. Together, they quietly erased an entire month's work. Here's the strange part. Most people don't even remember making those choices. Psychologists spent decades studying human decision-making. One surprising discovery keeps appearing. People believe they make logical financial decisions, but much of everyday spending happens almost automatically. Habits take over, emotions take over, stress takes over. Our brains love shortcuts. They conserve energy whenever possible. Instead of carefully evaluating every purchase, the mind asks a much simpler question. Does this feel good right now? If the answer is yes, the decision is often already made. That's why buying something new feels exciting. For a moment, the future seems brighter, life feels more complete. Then the feeling fades. Scientists even have a name for this, the hedonic treadmill. No matter how exciting today's purchase feels, there's this tomorrow it becomes ordinary. Soon, the brain wants another reward, another package, another experience, another upgrade. The cycle repeats, except the wallet keeps getting lighter. What happened next surprised researchers. They discovered that increasing income often doesn't solve this problem. In many cases, people simply spend more. A bigger house, a newer car, more expensive holidays, higher monthly payments. The lifestyle expands, savings don't. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. Pour in more water, the bucket still empties, unless you repair the hole. But the real mystery was only beginning, because this isn't a modern problem. Humans have struggled with desire for thousands of years, long before credit cards, long before online shopping, long before advertisements followed us from screen to screen. Ancient philosophers noticed something strange. The more people chased comfort, the less satisfied they often became. In Greece, the Stoics warned against becoming servants to possessions. In India, spiritual teachers spoke about attachment. In China, wise thinkers described balance as the foundation of peace. And in Japan, a different answer slowly emerged. Quiet, simple, practical. Instead of fighting desire, it asked people to observe it. That tiny difference changed everything. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand why, we need to travel back in time. Japan, more than 100 years ago. The country was changing rapidly. Railways stretched across the land. Factories appeared. Cities expanded. Families who had lived the same way for generations suddenly faced new choices. Modern life arrived. With modern temptations, people earned wages instead of growing much of what they consumed. Money moved faster. Spending became easier. And for many households, keeping control became harder. Among those watching this transformation was a remarkable woman. Not a banker. Not a government official, not an economist, a journalist, someone who believed ordinary people deserved practical wisdom. Her name was Hani Motoko. She noticed something curious. Families weren't failing because they lacked intelligence. They weren't failing because they were lazy. Many worked incredibly hard. The problem was something else. They had no relationship with their money. Money arrived. Money disappeared. Very few people ever stopped to ask, where, why, how? Those questions sounded almost too simple, yet almost nobody asked them honestly. Hani believed that financial freedom didn't begin with mathematics. It began with awareness. That single insight would become the heart of a method now known around the world. Pronounced, Kakeibo, a word often translated as household financial ledger. But that translation misses something important. That Kakeibo isn't merely about recording expenses. It's about paying attention. And attention changes people. Think about learning to drive. At first, every movement demands concentration. Mirrors, signals, speed, brakes, everything feels overwhelming. Years later, you drive almost without thinking. The brain builds automatic patterns. Money works the same way. Most spending becomes automatic. Automatic habits create automatic lives. Automatic lives create automatic futures. The frightening part is that many people never realize they're living on autopilot. Imagine walking through a supermarket. You only came for milk. 5 minutes later, your basket is full. Bright packaging, special offers, limited time discounts, buy one, get one free. None of these appeared by accident. Entire industries spend billions studying human psychology. Which colors attract attention? Which smells increase purchases? Which music slows customers down? Which shelf height sells the most products? The goal isn't to force you. The goal is something much subtler, to gently guide your attention, because attention usually becomes action. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If companies fight every day for your attention and you never examine your own choices, who is really controlling your wallet? This is where everything changes. Most financial advice begins with numbers. Save more, spend less, invest wisely. Useful advice, but incomplete. Because numbers don't create behavior. Thoughts do. Emotions do. Habits do. If you never change those, the numbers rarely stay changed. Imagine trying to lose weight. You can memorize every nutrition book ever written, but if stress sends you searching for comfort every evening, knowledge alone won't save you. Money follows the same rule. Information is everywhere. Transformation is rare. That's why some lottery winners lose everything. That's why some professional athletes go bankrupt. That's why people with high incomes often struggle just as much as those earning far less. The problem isn't always earning, it's managing desire. And desire can never be satisfied by more desire. There is an old Japanese saying that echoes through generations. Enough can be more than abundance. At first, that sounds impossible. How can less become more? How can saving create freedom when spending feels so rewarding? The answer hides inside a quiet psychological shift, one that most people never experience. Instead of asking, what can I afford? Kakeibo asks, what kind of life am I trying to build? One question chases purchases. The other chases purpose. That difference seems tiny until years begin to pass. Picture two roads through a forest. At the beginning, they're only inches apart. Walk them for a mile. The distance becomes noticeable. Walk them for 20 years. They may lead to entirely different worlds. Money habits work exactly like that. One small choice, repeated thousands of times, becomes a destiny. But then, a question appears that makes many people uncomfortable. If discipline is so powerful, why is it so difficult? The answer has less to do with money than with the human brain itself. And hidden inside that answer is one of the most fascinating discoveries in psychology. A discovery that explains why willpower alone almost always fails, and why the Japanese approach succeeded where so many other systems quietly fell apart. That story begins with an experiment no one expected to change the way we think about self-control. The experiment that exposed the human mind. Imagine sitting alone in a quiet room, nothing on the walls, nothing to distract you, only a small table, and resting on that table, a single marshmallow. A researcher smiles, you can eat it now, or if you wait 15 minutes, you'll get two. The door closes. Silence. At first, the choice seems ridiculous. Who would struggle to wait for just one extra marshmallow? But then, something fascinating begins to happen. The child stares, looks away, sings to themselves, covers their eyes, sniffs the sweet. Some even talk to it, as if negotiating with temptation itself. Others don't last 30 seconds. The marshmallow disappears. Years later, researchers tracked many of these children into adulthood. And while the original findings have since been debated and refined, one idea remained deeply influential. The ability to delay gratification often reflected skills that help people succeed later in life, not because they were born stronger, but because they learned how to manage impulses. That's the part most people miss. Discipline isn't about becoming a different person. It's about building a different relationship with temptation. And money may be the greatest temptation of all. Every swipe, every click, every notification, every sale ending tonight only. Each one whispers the same message. You deserve this. You've worked hard. It's only a small purchase. Except, life is rarely changed by one enormous mistake. It's changed by thousands of tiny decisions that feel completely harmless. One coffee, one subscription, one impulse purchase, one dinner that's just a little more expensive than planned. Alone, none of them matter very much. Together, they quietly rewrite the future. Here's the strange part. The human brain was never designed for modern shopping, for almost all of history. Our ancestors lived in a world of scarcity. Food wasn't guaranteed. Resources disappeared quickly. If something valuable appeared, taking it immediately often increased the chances of survival. Our brains still carry echoes of that ancient world. Except today, the valuable thing isn't ripe fruit or fresh water. It's a flash sale, a luxury watch, a new phone, a pair of shoes, an online checkout button. The environment changed. The brain didn't. This is why resisting temptation can feel exhausting. You're not simply fighting a habit. You're wrestling with instincts shaped over thousands of generations. But Japan discovered something unusual. Instead of trying to overpower human nature, it quietly redirected it, not through force, not through guilt, through awareness. Before we explore how, we need to understand another invisible trap. Imagine walking into a casino. There are no clocks, no windows, soft music fills the room, bright lights dance across polished machines. Every detail has been carefully designed, nothing is accidental. The carpet, the colors, even the scent in the air. The goal isn't entertainment, the goal is attention, because attention eventually becomes action. Now ask yourself something. How different is your smartphone? Bright notifications, endless scrolling, personalized advertisements, one-click buying, recommendations chosen by algorithms that know your habits better than some of your closest friends. The modern marketplace doesn't wait for your needs. It creates them. One moment you're checking the weather. 10 minutes later, you're comparing headphones you never planned to buy. The purchase feels spontaneous. But was it? Or did someone carefully prepare the path long before you arrived? This wasn't even the most surprising discovery. Behavioral economists began noticing something remarkable. People rarely spend because they need something. More often, they spend because they feel something. Stress, loneliness, celebration, boredom, anxiety, excitement. Money quietly became emotional medicine, not because it healed us, but because for a brief moment it distracted us. Imagine finishing a difficult day. You're exhausted. The world feels heavy. You promise yourself just one small treat, a new shirt, a gadget, a takeaway meal. For a few minutes, the brain releases dopamine. Everything feels lighter. Then, the parcel arrives. The excitement fades. The object becomes ordinary. A week later, it's just another possession. The emotion returns, and the cycle quietly begins again. Psychologists sometimes call this emotional spending, but there's another way to think about it. It's not shopping. It's self-soothing. Except the comfort doesn't last. The bill does. What happened next changed everything. Scientists using brain imaging discovered that anticipation can activate reward systems even before a purchase is made. Sometimes, the excitement of imagining ownership feels stronger than actually owning the thing itself. Think about that. Your mind can become addicted. not to possessions, but to possibility. Suddenly, online shopping makes perfect sense. You don't even need to buy. Browsing alone can feel rewarding. Wish lists, product reviews, countdown timers. Each one feeds anticipation. Each one strengthens the habit. No wonder so many people say, I don't know where my money goes. The money isn't disappearing. It's following invisible emotional pathways. And unless those pathways become visible, nothing changes. This is where Kakeibo begins to separate itself from ordinary budgeting. Most budgets ask one question. How much did you spend? Kakeibo asks something much deeper. What were you feeling when you spent it? At first, that sounds almost unrelated, but imagine two identical purchases. Two people each spend £50 on dinner. The first celebrates an anniversary. The memory lasts forever. The second orders expensive food because they felt lonely. Same amount, completely different meaning. Money isn't just mathematics. It's psychology. It's memory. It's identity. That's why one purchase can enrich your life, while another quietly empties it. Here's the real mystery. If spending is emotional, can saving become emotional too? Most people assume saving means sacrifice, giving things up, missing out, delaying happiness. But Japanese culture approached the idea differently. Saving wasn't punishment, it was preparation, a quiet act of respect toward the future. Imagine a farmer planting seeds. To an impatient observer, it looks like loss. The seeds disappear into the soil. Nothing comes back immediately. Weeks pass, still nothing. But beneath the surface, everything is changing. Roots begin to spread. Life gathers strength where nobody can see it. Savings work the same way. For a while, your bank balance seems almost unchanged. Your lifestyle looks ordinary. Others may even appear richer than you. Except appearances can be deceptive. One unexpected expense arrives, a medical bill, a broken car, a job loss. Suddenly, the person with hidden roots remains standing, the one without them falls. That quiet strength is difficult to photograph. It's difficult to post online. It doesn't attract applause, but it creates something far more valuable, peace. And perhaps peace has always been the rarest form of wealth. There's an old Japanese aesthetic that values quiet simplicity over loud display. Beauty isn't measured by excess, it's measured by harmony. The same philosophy quietly echoes through Kakeibo. Instead of asking, how can I impress people? It asks, how can I live well? Those two questions produce entirely different lives. One chases appearance, the other builds stability. One depends on comparison, the other depends on clarity. Except, modern life constantly pushes us toward comparison. Someone buys a larger house. Someone posts holiday photos from an island paradise. Someone upgrades their car. Someone celebrates another luxury purchase. Without noticing, we begin measuring our lives against carefully edited moments from someone else's. Comparison quietly becomes consumption. Consumption becomes debt. Debt becomes anxiety. Anxiety creates more emotional spending. The circle closes. But the Japanese notebook waiting in the background was designed to break that circle. Not with complicated formulas, not with financial jargon, with questions, simple questions, questions that almost feel too obvious, questions so powerful. They force honesty, and honesty can be deeply uncomfortable. Imagine writing every purchase by hand, not once, every day, every coffee, every snack, every impulse, every forgotten subscription, nothing hidden, nothing estimated, nothing rounded away, just truth. At first, most people resist, not because writing is difficult, because seeing reality is. Numbers have a way of removing excuses. You can argue with opinions. You can't argue with your own handwriting. This is where everything begins to change, because awareness has an unusual property. It alters behavior, even before you try to change it. Researchers have observed this effect in many different fields. People who record what they eat often begin eating differently. People who track exercise usually become more active. People who monitor their sleep often improve their routines. Not because anyone forced them, because observation itself creates consciousness. Kakeibo quietly applies the same principle to money. Before asking you to save more, it asks you to notice more. That sounds almost too simple until you try it. Then you discover something unexpected. The greatest financial leak was never hidden in your income. It was hidden in your attention. But the notebook contains one final secret: 4 deceptively simple questions. Questions that seem ordinary on paper, yet have transformed households for generations. The first question appears almost innocent, but hidden inside it is the beginning of an entirely new relationship with money. And once you answer it honestly, there is no going back. 4 questions that can change an entire life. Imagine opening a notebook. Its pages are blank, no colorful charts, no complicated formulas, no financial jargon, just quiet white paper. It doesn't look powerful. It doesn't promise overnight wealth. It doesn't promise you'll become a millionaire. In fact, it almost looks too ordinary to matter. But appearances can be deceiving. History is filled with simple tools that changed the world. A compass, a calendar, a map. None of them changed reality. They changed how people understood reality, and once understanding changed, everything else followed. Kakeibo works the same way. It doesn't magically create money. It changes the way you see it. And once your perception changes, your behavior quietly begins to follow. But then comes the first question. A question so simple, most people never truly ask it. How much money do you actually have? Not how much you expect to earn. Not your credit limit. Not what might arrive next month. Not what you hope your investments will become. Right now, today. What is real? At first, that question sounds almost childish. Of course, you know how much money you have. Or do you? Imagine asking 10 people this question without letting them check their banking app. Many would hesitate. Some would guess. Others would be wildly wrong. Isn't that strange? We know the battery percentage on our phones. We know the score of last night's game. We remember passwords to websites we barely use. Yet many people cannot confidently answer the most basic question about their own finances. Here's the strange part. The brain dislikes uncertainty. When numbers feel vague, the imagination fills the gaps. You tell yourself, I think I'm doing okay. I'll probably have enough. I'll sort it out later. That uncertainty creates comfort, but false comfort. Because reality hasn't changed. Only your awareness has. This is where Kakeibo begins. Not with saving, with truth. There is something deeply powerful about writing a number on paper. It becomes difficult to ignore, difficult to argue with, difficult to pretend it means something else. The notebook doesn't judge, it simply reflects, like a still lake reflecting the sky. The clearer the reflection, the easier it becomes to navigate. But then comes the second question. And this one changes everything. How much would you like to save? Notice what it doesn't ask. It doesn't ask, how much can you save if nothing goes wrong? It doesn't ask, how much is left at the end of the month? Because that's exactly how most people save. Or rather, why they don't. Imagine filling a glass with water. Now imagine punching tiny holes near the bottom. Then you keep pouring more water in. Will the glass ever stay full? Probably not. Yet that's how millions of people approach money. Spend first. Save whatever survives, except almost nothing survives. Expenses expand, desires multiply, unexpected costs appear, the future keeps getting postponed. Kakeibo quietly reverses the order. Saving becomes intentional, not accidental. Think about a farmer again. Does the farmer wait until every family meal is finished before choosing seeds for next year's harvest? Of course not. The seeds come first, because without tomorrow's harvest, there won't be enough for future meals. Savings are seeds, they're not leftovers. That tiny shift in thinking changes the entire relationship with money. Suddenly, saving isn't what remains after living, it's part of living. But here's the uncomfortable question. If someone asked you today, what are you saving for? Could you answer immediately? Not just an emergency, not just the future, something real, something vivid, a home, starting a business, helping your parents, traveling the world, retiring with dignity, education, peace of mind. The brain responds differently when a goal has a face, a purpose, a story. Without purpose, saving feels like deprivation. With purpose, saving becomes hope. Researchers studying motivation have found something remarkable. People persist far longer when they connect everyday actions to a meaningful future. The action stays the same. The meaning changes. Meaning creates endurance. That's why Kakeibo isn't only about numbers, it's about intention. Every pound begins traveling toward a destination. Instead of wandering aimlessly, it receives a mission. Here's the fascinating part. Military historians often describe how disciplined armies succeed and not merely because of strength, but because every soldier understands the mission. Money behaves similarly. Without direction, it scatters. With direction, it gathers. The third question arrives quietly, almost like a whisper. How much are you actually spending? Not approximately, not roughly, exactly. At first, many people believe this part will be easy until they begin writing the £3 coffee, the £9 lunch, the £18 takeaway, the £12 streaming subscription, the £27 online purchase that seemed insignificant, the £6 convenience shop visit, the £45 dinner. Individually, each expense looks harmless. Together, they begin telling a story. And stories reveal patterns. Imagine footprints in fresh snow. One footprint means little. Hundreds reveal a journey. Your spending works the same way. One purchase rarely defines your life. Repeated purchases do. Then something unexpected happens. People often discover they aren't spending the most on luxury. They're spending on invisibility, things they barely remember buying. Tiny habits repeated so often, they disappear into routine. This phenomenon has fascinated behavioral scientists for years. The brain compresses familiar actions. Once something becomes habitual, it almost vanishes from conscious awareness. Think about brushing your teeth. Can you remember every time you did it last month? Probably not. Habit removes attention. That's useful for healthy routines. It's dangerous for unhealthy financial ones. Kakeibo quietly brings attention back. Every entry interrupts autopilot. Every written expense asks a silent question. Was this worth it? Not with guilt, with curiosity. And curiosity is far more powerful than shame. Shame makes people hide. Curiosity makes people learn. This is where many budgeting systems fail. They punish mistakes. Kakeibo studies them. Imagine a scientist observing an experiment. When something unexpected happens, the scientist doesn't panic. They ask, what caused this? Your notebook becomes a laboratory. Every expense becomes data, not evidence that you're failing, evidence that you're learning. That simple shift transforms frustration into understanding. Then the fourth question appears, and perhaps it is the most important of all. How can you improve next month? Not, how can you become perfect? Not, how can you never make another mistake? Just, how can you improve? One step, one adjustment, one better decision. That's it. Notice how different this feels. Modern culture loves dramatic transformation, 30-day challenges, extreme makeovers, complete life resets, but nature rarely works that way. An oak tree doesn't appear overnight, neither does financial freedom. Small roots, then a stronger trunk, then branches, then years later shade, strength, stability. Kakeibo follows nature's rhythm, tiny improvements, repeated patiently, month after month. Imagine reducing unnecessary spending by just £5 a day. It barely feels significant. Many people spend that without noticing. But over a year, that's more than £1,800 without earning another penny, without working longer hours, without winning the lottery, simply through awareness. Now imagine those savings quietly growing. Year after year, the numbers become impressive. But something even more valuable changes. Identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who struggles with money. You begin seeing yourself as someone who makes intentional choices. Psychologists call this identity-based behavior. Actions become easier when they match the person you believe you are. If you think, I'm terrible with money, every mistake confirms the belief. But if you think, I'm becoming someone who manages money wisely, every thoughtful decision strengthens that identity. Change stops feeling forced. It becomes natural. Here's where everything connects. The 4 questions are not really about finance, they're about awareness. Awareness of reality, awareness of goals, awareness of habits, awareness of growth. Money simply happens to be the mirror. The real transformation occurs inside the person holding the pen. There is an old Japanese idea that perfection is less important than continuous refinement, not becoming flawless, becoming slightly better, again and again. And again, that philosophy appears everywhere in Japanese life, in craftsmanship, in martial arts, in tea ceremonies, in gardening. Mastery isn't achieved through one extraordinary moment. It's built through thousands of ordinary moments treated with extraordinary care. Kakeibo belongs to that same tradition. It asks for consistency, not brilliance, patience, not speed, reflection, not perfection. But then, a deeper mystery begins to emerge. If 4 simple questions are so effective, why do so many people abandon them after only a few weeks? Why does motivation disappear? Why do good intentions slowly fade back into old habits? The answer has nothing to do with laziness, and everything to do with one invisible force: a force that shapes almost every decision we make without our noticing. It's called environment. And once you understand how your surroundings quietly control your choices, you'll never look at your home, your phone, or even your wallet in quite the same way again, right? The invisible force that controls your money. Imagine standing at the entrance of two different paths. The first is smooth, brightly lit, lined with signs pointing toward cafes, shopping centers, flashing advertisements, and endless opportunities to spend. The second path is quieter. There are fewer distractions, fewer temptations, no flashing lights, no urgent messages demanding your attention. Now ask yourself a simple question. Which path would be easier to stay disciplined on? Most people answer without hesitation, the quieter one. Yet almost no one builds their financial life that way. Instead, they place themselves inside an environment that constantly encourages spending, and then blame themselves for lacking willpower. This may be one of the greatest misunderstandings about discipline. People think discipline lives inside the person, but often, discipline lives inside the environment. Here's a strange experiment. Imagine placing a bowl of sweets on your kitchen table. Every time you walk past, you eat one, not because you're hungry, because it's there. Now imagine moving that same bowl into a cupboard. Nothing else changes. The sweets are exactly the same. You still like them. But suddenly, you eat far fewer. Did your self-control become stronger overnight? No. Your environment became quieter. That tiny change altered your behavior. Without effort, without motivation, without struggle. This is one of the most powerful discoveries in behavioral psychology. Human beings are deeply influenced by what is visible, what is convenient, what is repeated. We often believe we make independent choices. In reality, our surroundings quietly shape those choices long before we notice. Now replace the bowl of sweets with money. Your phone is always within reach. Shopping apps are one tap away. Advertisements follow you across the internet. Emails announce exclusive offers. Notifications whisper, only 3 hours left, limited stock. Don't miss out. Your environment never sleeps. It is constantly inviting you to spend. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Those invitations are not random. Entire teams of psychologists, designers, marketers, and behavioral scientists spend years studying one question. How do we make people buy more? Every color, every sound, every button, every countdown timer, every recommendation, every reward program, every customer's also bought has been carefully designed, not necessarily to help you, but to keep your attention, because attention eventually becomes spending. Imagine walking into a supermarket for one carton of milk. 5 minutes later, your trolley contains crisps, chocolate, soft drinks, a magazine, a scented candle. None of those items were on your list. So how did they arrive in your basket? The answer begins before you even enter the shop. Fresh bread is often placed near the entrance. Its smell creates warmth, comfort, home. Essential products like milk are usually placed at the back. You must walk through dozens of tempting displays before reaching them. Bright colors draw your eyes. Special offers create urgency. Large trolleys make purchases look smaller. Slow music encourages lingering. The longer you stay, the more likely you are to buy. Nothing is accidental. Now think about your favorite shopping website. The strategy isn't very different. Products you viewed yesterday appear again today. Recommendations seem strangely accurate. Reviews reduce hesitation. Scarcity increases desire. Only 2 left. 20 people are viewing this now. Sale ends at midnight. The product hasn't changed. Your emotions have. This wasn't even the most surprising discovery. Researchers found that the anticipation of losing an opportunity often feels stronger than the joy of gaining one. This tendency is known as loss aversion. Imagine finding a 20 pounds note on the pavement. You'd probably feel pleased. Now imagine losing 20 pounds from your wallet. The emotional pain is usually much stronger. The amounts are identical. The feelings are not. Businesses understand this well. That's why they rarely say, buy this product. Instead, they suggest you might lose something by waiting, a discount, an opportunity, a limited edition, a place in line. The fear of missing out quietly replaces rational thinking. Suddenly, buying feels like avoiding loss. Instead of creating expense, it's brilliant psychology, but dangerous if you don't recognize it. Here's another invisible force: social proof. Imagine walking past 2 restaurants. One is empty. The other has people waiting outside. Which one do you instinctively trust? Most people choose the busy one. Our brains assume, if everyone else is doing it, it must be good. That instinct helped our ancestors survive. If everyone ran from danger, running was usually wise. But in the modern world, that same instinct creates unexpected problems. Someone posts photos of a luxury holiday. Another buys the newest phone. A colleague upgrades their car. An influencer shows a designer wardrobe. Without noticing, comparison begins. The thought arrives quietly. Maybe I should have that too. Except, you aren't comparing your everyday life to someone else's everyday life. You're comparing your ordinary Tuesday to their carefully selected highlights. Imagine watching only the winning moments of a football match. Never the missed passes, never the injuries, never the mistakes. You'd believe perfection was normal. Social media often works exactly like that. Success is visible. Debt usually isn't. Luxury is photographed. Monthly repayments rarely are. A smiling family poses beside a beautiful new car. The years of financial pressure remain outside the frame. This illusion has a hidden cost. It quietly changes your definition of enough. The house that once felt spacious now feels small. The phone that worked perfectly yesterday suddenly feels outdated. The holiday that once seemed exciting now appears ordinary. Comparison has stolen gratitude. And gratitude may be the strongest defense against unnecessary spending. There is a beautiful Japanese word, motenai. It expresses a sense of regret over waste, not just wasting money, wasting food, time, resources, opportunity, even potential. Imagine finishing a meal. One grain of rice remains. Instead of seeing something insignificant, motenai encourages respect. Respect for the farmer, the rain, the soil, the effort, the journey that grain made to reach your plate. Suddenly, throwing it away feels different. Now imagine applying that philosophy to money. Every pound represents hours of your life, time you can never recover, perhaps a difficult shift at work, a missed evening with family, a stressful meeting, a long commute. Money isn't just paper, it's life converted into numbers. When you spend carelessly, you're not only spending currency, you're spending hours that can never return. That thought changes everything. A 30-pound impulse purchase no longer looks like just 30 pounds. It becomes 3 hours of your life, or 5, or 10, depending on your circumstances. Now ask yourself, would you casually throw away 3 hours of your life? Probably not. Then why throw away what those hours created? This is where Kakeibo quietly reveals another layer. The notebook isn't tracking money, it's tracking life. Every entry represents a decision. Every decision represents a value. Every value slowly builds an identity. Imagine two sculptors working on identical blocks of stone. One removes random pieces every day. The other chips away carefully, patiently, intentionally. Months later, the difference becomes astonishing. Your financial life is being sculpted in exactly the same way. Not by dramatic moments, by ordinary ones. A coffee, a subscription, a canceled purchase, a thoughtful decision. One tiny action rarely changes your future. Thousands of them always do. Here's the strange part. People often ask, how can I become more disciplined? Perhaps the better question is, how can I make good decisions easier? Imagine placing your savings into a separate account the moment you're paid. Now the money isn't sitting in front of you. Temptation has become slightly more difficult. That small obstacle changes behavior. Imagine deleting shopping apps from your phone. You can still buy something, but now you must use a web browser, log in again, search again. Those extra seconds create space. Space for reflection, space to ask, do I really want this? Behavioral scientists call these moments friction. Tiny inconveniences, almost invisible, yet remarkably powerful. Good habits become easier. Bad habits become slightly harder. Over weeks, those tiny changes reshape behavior. Think of a river. Water always follows the easiest path. If you build small channels, the river slowly changes direction. Human behavior follows the same principle. Design the environment, and behavior begins to flow differently. This idea appears everywhere in Japanese culture. A traditional Japanese home often embraces simplicity, fewer possessions, cleaner spaces, objects chosen with care rather than accumulated without thought. The goal isn't emptiness, the goal is intention. Everything has a place, everything has a purpose. Without constant visual clutter, the mind becomes quieter, and perhaps a quieter mind makes wiser financial decisions. But then, an unexpected question emerges. If the environment shapes behavior, Who is shaping your environment, you or someone else? That question is more important than it first appears, because every advertisement, every notification, every recommendation, every carefully designed shopping experience is competing to answer it for you. Yet there is one habit, practiced by generations in Japan, that quietly restores control. It requires no expensive technology, no financial expertise, no exceptional intelligence, only 10 or 15 minutes, once a week, with a notebook, and complete honesty. It sounds almost too simple, but what happens during those few quiet minutes has transformed ordinary households for more than 100 years, and it begins with a ritual that feels less like accounting and more like meditation, the weekly ritual that quietly rewires the mind. Imagine a quiet Sunday evening. The week is almost over. Outside, the world is still moving. Cars pass, phones buzz, televisions flicker. Somewhere, people are rushing to finish one more task before Monday arrives. But inside a small room, someone opens a notebook. No alarms, no distractions, no hurry, only silence. A pen touches the paper, and for the next 15 minutes, life slows down. It doesn't look extraordinary. No one would call it exciting. There are no dramatic breakthroughs, no sudden fortunes, yet this simple ritual has quietly changed thousands of lives. Because something unusual happens whenever a person pauses long enough to examine their own choices. The noise begins to fade, patterns begin to appear, and awareness returns. That is the true power of Kakeibo, not the notebook, not the numbers, the pause. Modern life rarely gives us permission to pause. We wake up, check our phones, reply to messages, rush to work, eat while distracted, scroll while resting, watch television while eating, think about tomorrow before today has even ended. Days blur together, weeks disappear, months pass before we realize how quickly time has moved. Money follows the same rhythm. Income arrives, expenses happen, another month begins, then another. Many people never stop long enough to ask, what actually happened? Imagine driving across an unfamiliar country without ever looking at a map. Eventually, you would become lost, not because you lacked intelligence, because you lacked reflection. Reflection is how human beings correct their direction. Without reflection, even hard work can lead us somewhere we never intended to go. This is why the weekly Kakeibo ritual matters so much. It interrupts momentum. It creates a small island of awareness inside an ocean of distraction, and awareness changes behavior in remarkable ways. Psychologists have observed something fascinating. When people regularly reflect on their actions, they often begin making better decisions before receiving any advice, not because they suddenly became wiser, because reflection exposes patterns that were previously invisible. Imagine recording every meal you eat for 1 month. Soon, you notice something. Perhaps you snack whenever you're stressed. Perhaps you eat more when you're tired. Perhaps weekends completely change your routine. The food hasn't changed. You have. You can see. Money behaves exactly the same way. 1 week's spending may seem random. Several weeks reveal habits. Several months reveal identity. And identity shapes destiny. But then a curious thing begins to happen. The notebook starts asking questions. Even when it's closed, you're standing in a shop, holding something you didn't plan to buy. A quiet thought appears. Will I have to write this down later? Suddenly, the decision feels different. Nothing external has changed. The price is the same. The product is the same. The only difference is awareness. Behavioral scientists sometimes call this the observer effect in self-monitoring. The simple act of knowing you'll record a behavior often changes the behavior itself. It's almost as though the future version of yourself, the one who will write in the notebook, is quietly watching today's decisions. Imagine trying to tell a story that someone else will read tomorrow. You naturally become more thoughtful, more honest, more intentional. Kakeibo turns your future self into a gentle witness. Not a judge, a witness. And witnesses have power because they keep us honest. Here's the strange part. Honesty with ourselves is often far more difficult than honesty with others. It's easy to blame circumstances. Prices are rising, life is expensive, unexpected bills keep appearing. Sometimes those things are absolutely true. But hidden beneath those realities, there are also choices. Small choices, repeated choices, invisible choices. The notebook doesn't deny life's difficulties. It simply asks which part was outside your control and which part wasn't. That distinction changes everything. Imagine standing in the rain. You can't stop the rain, but you can carry an umbrella. Financial storms work the same way. Economic downturns, inflation, unexpected repairs, medical expenses, some events cannot be controlled. Preparing for them can. This shift from blame to responsibility is subtle, but powerful. Responsibility is often misunderstood. People hear the word and think it means guilt. It doesn't. Responsibility simply means recognizing the part of life we can influence, because energy spent blaming yesterday cannot build tomorrow. Here's another quiet lesson hidden inside the weekly ritual. Progress is rarely dramatic. Imagine watching a bamboo plant. For weeks, nothing remarkable seems to happen. The soil looks almost unchanged. An impatient observer might conclude that nothing is growing, except beneath the surface. Roots are spreading. Strength is developing. Then one day, the bamboo begins rising with astonishing speed. People admire the sudden growth. They rarely appreciate the invisible preparation that made it possible. Financial discipline follows the same pattern. The first month feels ordinary. The second month feels slow. The third month may even feel frustrating. Then something unexpected happens. An emergency appears. But instead of panic, there is calm. The washing machine breaks. The car needs repairs. An unexpected journey becomes necessary. The expense still hurts, but it doesn't destroy your peace. That moment reveals the true value of saving. Savings don't eliminate problems. They reduce fear. And fear has a price far greater than money. Imagine lying awake at 2 o'clock in the morning, wondering how you'll pay next week's bills, wondering what happens if one more unexpected expense arrives. Now imagine facing the exact same situation, but knowing you have enough set aside. The problem still exists, but panic does not. Money cannot buy happiness, but preparation often buys peace, and peace changes everything. There is a beautiful concept in Japanese culture, ma. It describes the meaningful space between things, the silence between notes in music, the empty space in a garden, the pause between words in a conversation. Western thinking often focuses on adding more possessions, more speed, more productivity. Japanese philosophy sometimes asks a different question. What if the empty space is just as important? Kakeibo quietly creates that space. A pause before spending, a pause before reacting, a pause before habits take control. Inside that pause, choice becomes possible. Without the pause, habit usually wins. Think about an archer. The moment before releasing the arrow, everything becomes still. Breathing slows, attention narrows. The shot is decided before the arrow leaves the bow. Money works in much the same way. The purchase is often decided before the payment is made. If you create space before that moment, you regain control. Here's where everything begins to connect. The notebook, the weekly ritual, the 4 questions, the quiet reflection. None of these exist to create perfect budgets. They exist to create conscious decisions. Conscious decisions repeated over months become habits. Habits repeated over years become character. Character quietly shapes destiny. Most people spend years searching for a secret investment, a hidden opportunity, a shortcut to wealth. Yet one of the greatest advantages may come from something far less exciting. Consistency. Imagine 2 people saving 10 pounds each day. One does it only when they feel motivated. The other does it whether they feel motivated or not. After several years, who is likely to have built greater security? The answer has almost nothing to do with mathematics. It has everything to do with routine. Motivation is emotional. Routine is dependable. Motivation comes and goes like the weather. Routine continues through sunshine and storms. This is why Japanese craftsmanship has earned admiration around the world. Whether making a sword, a ceramic bowl, a garden, or preparing tea, the focus has never been on dramatic bursts of effort. It has always been on faithful repetition, doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. Again, and again, and again. Kakeibo belongs to that same tradition. It asks very little each day, but it asks consistently. That consistency produces something unexpected. Confidence. Not the loud confidence that demands attention. The quiet confidence that comes from knowing your life is no longer drifting. Imagine standing at the helm of a ship. The sea is rough. The wind changes. The waves are unpredictable. You cannot control the ocean, but you can keep your hands on the wheel. Week after week, the notebook quietly places your hands back on that wheel. You stop feeling like money is happening to you. You begin feeling that you're guiding it. And perhaps That is the deepest lesson of all. Financial freedom is not simply having more money, it is having more choice. The choice to say no, the choice to wait, the choice to help others, the choice to rest, the choice to face uncertainty without fear. But then, a new mystery appears. If Kakeibo has helped people for more than a century, why do so many modern financial systems ignore its greatest strength? The answer lies in a surprising conflict between technology and attention, because sometimes the smartest tool isn't the newest one. Sometimes a simple pen and paper can accomplish something that even the most advanced app quietly fails to do. Why a notebook can be smarter than your smartphone. Imagine placing two objects on a table. On one side, the latest smartphone, powered by billions of calculations every second, connected to satellites, artificial intelligence, infinite information. On the other side, a simple notebook, a few sheets of paper, a pen, no batteries, no internet, no notifications. Which one would you trust to transform your financial life? Most people point to the phone. It seems obvious. Technology solves problems. Technology makes life easier. Technology helps us work faster. And in many ways, that's true. But then, a strange contradiction appears. Despite having more financial apps than any generation in history, millions of people still struggle to save. The tools became smarter. The habits often didn't. Why? Because information isn't the same as transformation. Imagine buying the world's best running shoes. Owning them doesn't make you healthier. Imagine purchasing expensive paintbrushes. That doesn't make you an artist. The tool matters, but the relationship with the tool matters even more. Money works exactly the same way. An app can record every purchase automatically. It can generate colorful charts, predict future spending, send reminders, calculate interest, analyze trends. Yet, it cannot force awareness, because awareness requires attention, and attention cannot be automated. Here's something fascinating. Researchers studying handwriting have repeatedly found that writing by hand often engages the brain differently than typing. When you write, you move more slowly. You process information more deeply. Your brain cannot simply skim. Every letter requires intention. Every word demands presence. The act itself becomes part of learning. Imagine writing the words, "I spent 42 pounds on takeaway food." Now imagine reading the exact same sentence generated automatically by an app. The information is identical. The experience isn't. One requires participation. The other requires observation. Kakeibo depends on participation because participation creates ownership. Ownership creates responsibility. Responsibility creates change. This wasn't even the most surprising discovery. Neuroscientists studying habits found that slowing down a routine often interrupts automatic behavior. Think about tying your shoes. You probably don't think about it. Your hands simply move. Now imagine tying them with your non-dominant hand. Suddenly, you become fully aware. Every movement demands attention. Writing expenses by hand produces something similar. It slows the process. That pause interrupts autopilot. And in that pause, choice returns. Imagine buying a new jacket online. One click, payment approved, confirmation received. The entire purchase takes less than 30 seconds. Now imagine later that evening, opening your notebook, writing, jacket, 85 pounds. For a moment, the excitement fades, reality appears. The purchase becomes tangible, not because the notebook is judging you, because it is reflecting you, like a mirror that never lies. There is another reason the notebook matters, and it has nothing to do with money. Modern technology is designed to remove friction. Everything is becoming faster. Food arrives with one tap. Films begin instantly. Messages cross continents in seconds. Convenience has become one of civilization's greatest achievements. But here's the paradox. The easiest decision isn't always the wisest one. Sometimes convenience quietly removes reflection. Imagine standing in a library. To borrow a book, you walk through shelves, you discover unexpected titles, you think carefully before making a choice. Now imagine endless scrolling online. Thousands of books appear instantly. Choice becomes overwhelming. Attention becomes fragmented. Selection becomes impulsive. More options, less clarity. The same thing happens with money. When spending becomes effortless, thinking often becomes optional. Contactless payments, digital wallets, one-click ordering, automatic renewals. The less we feel the transaction, the easier it becomes to repeat it. Psychologists call this the pain of paying. Years ago, people counted cash, they watched notes leave their hands, they felt the cost. Today, a small vibration from a phone replaces that experience. The payment happens almost invisibly. The emotional signal becomes weaker. Spending often increases, not because people became less responsible, because the experience became less real. Imagine carrying 100 pounds in cash. Every purchase reduces the visible amount. The wallet grows lighter, your eyes notice, your mind notices. Now imagine spending the same amount digitally over several days. The money disappears silently. Unless you deliberately check, nothing feels different. The human brain responds strongly to visible change. Invisible change is easier to ignore. That is why Kakeibo insists on visibility. Every expense becomes visible. Every decision leaves a trace. Every month tells a story. But then, another mystery appears. If awareness is so powerful, why do some people still abandon the notebook? The answer isn't lack of discipline, it's perfectionism. Imagine someone beginning a fitness routine. They exercise every day for 2 weeks. Then one busy afternoon, they miss a session. A thought appears. I've already failed. One missed workout becomes a forgotten month, not because of laziness, because perfection became the goal. Money habits often follow the same pattern. Someone forgets to record 3 purchases, they become embarrassed. The notebook stays closed, days become weeks. The habit quietly disappears. Kakeibo was never meant to demand perfection. It was designed to encourage honesty. There is a profound Japanese philosophy known as Kaizen. The word means continuous improvement. Small improvements, made consistently. No dramatic revolutions, no impossible standards, just steady progress. Imagine a craftsman building a wooden table. Every morning, he improves one tiny detail, one smoother edge, one cleaner joint, one better finish. Years later, people admire his mastery. They rarely notice that it was built from thousands of tiny improvements. Financial mastery grows the same way. One thoughtful purchase, one unnecessary expense avoided, one extra 20 pounds saved, one weekly reflection completed. None of these changes your life overnight. Together, they quietly reshape your future. This is where Kakeibo and Kaizen meet. One provides awareness, the other provides patience. Together, they become remarkably powerful. There is an old story from Japan about a stonecutter. Every day, he struck the same enormous rock, one swing, then another. Nothing happened. The surface barely changed. People laughed. They walked past. Some wondered why he bothered. Then, after hundreds of strikes, the rock suddenly split in two. Observers believe the final strike caused the break. The stonecutter knew better. Every strike mattered, even the ones that appeared to accomplish nothing. Saving money feels exactly like that. The first month seems insignificant. The 5th month feels ordinary. The 12th month still doesn't look dramatic. Then one day, an opportunity appears, perhaps the chance to start a business, perhaps a dream holiday paid for without debt, perhaps enough savings to leave a job that no longer brings happiness. People admire the outcome. They rarely see the 1,000 quiet decisions that made it possible. Here's something even deeper. Kakeibo isn't really teaching financial discipline. It's teaching self-respect. Think about that for a moment. Every time you pause before spending, you're sending yourself a message. My future matters. Every time you save intentionally, you're saying, I deserve security. Every time you complete the weekly ritual, you're proving something. Not to the world, to yourself. Identity changes through evidence, not promises. Every thoughtful decision becomes evidence. I am someone who keeps commitments. I am someone who plans. I am someone who acts with intention. Over time, those quiet pieces of evidence become stronger than old doubts. And once identity changes, behavior begins to follow naturally. But then, one final question emerges. If the notebook changes the individual, can it also change an entire family? Can one simple habit pass from parents to children, from one generation to the next? Because the greatest wealth in Japan was never measured only in money. It was measured in values. And hidden inside the story of Kakeibo is a lesson about legacy that may be even more valuable than the savings themselves. That lesson begins around an ordinary family dinner table, the wealth that never appears on a bank statement. Imagine a small wooden table. The evening meal has just ended. The bowls are nearly empty. The conversation has slowed. Outside, the streets are quiet. Inside, a parent opens a notebook. A child watches from across the room. No lecture begins, no speech about responsibility, no complicated lesson about economics, just a simple question. How did we do this month? The child listens, the parent smiles. There were things we wanted, but we chose what mattered most. The notebook closes. The moment lasts only a few minutes. Years later, that child may remember almost nothing about the numbers, but they will remember something much more important. The feeling, the atmosphere, the quiet confidence that money was something to be managed, not feared. This is how values travel through generations, not through instructions, through observation. Children are remarkable students. Long before they understand words, they understand behavior. Imagine telling a child, money isn't everything, then spending every weekend chasing the newest possessions. Which lesson will they believe? The words or the actions? Human beings have always learned this way. For thousands of years, skills were passed from one generation to the next. A blacksmith watched another blacksmith. A farmer learned by walking beside a parent through the fields. A carpenter didn't begin with books. They began with observation. Money habits are no different. The greatest financial lessons are rarely taught in classrooms. They're absorbed quietly, at home. Here's the strange part. Many parents believe they are protecting their children by hiding financial conversations. They whisper about bills, avoid discussing debt, pretend money problems don't exist. The intention is understandable. They don't want children to worry. But silence teaches lessons too. When children never see healthy financial discussions, money becomes mysterious, even frightening. Imagine growing up without ever watching someone cook. Then one day, you're expected to prepare every meal yourself. You would probably feel uncertain. Money often works the same way. If children never witness thoughtful financial decisions, adulthood becomes a series of expensive experiments. Japan approached this differently. For generations, many families treated financial awareness as an ordinary part of life. Not an embarrassing secret, not a source of shame, simply another household responsibility, like preparing meals, cleaning the home, caring for the garden. Money wasn't separated from life, it was woven into it. This wasn't about creating wealthy children, it was about creating capable adults. Adults who understood that every choice carried consequences. Imagine two young people receiving their very first paycheck. The first sees it as permission to spend, the second sees it as responsibility. The amount is identical. The future may not be, because wealth rarely begins with income, it begins with perspective. There is an old Japanese principle that appears again and again in different forms. Respect what supports your life, respect your tools, respect your time, respect your relationships, respect your resources. Money becomes another expression of respect, not because money itself is sacred, but because of what it represents. Think about a single 50 pounds note. At first glance, it's only paper. But look closer. Perhaps it represents 4 hours spent serving customers, or repairing machinery, or teaching students. Perhaps it represents a nurse working through the night, a builder standing in freezing rain, a parent working overtime to provide for a family. Money carries invisible stories. Every coin, every note, every digital payment, behind each one, someone gave a piece of their life. When you begin seeing money this way, waste feels different. Not because someone tells you to feel guilty, because gratitude quietly changes perception. There is another Japanese idea that beautifully complements Kakeibo, Ichigo Ichi. It is often translated as one time, one meeting. The idea reminds us that every moment is unique. It will never happen again in exactly the same way. Imagine sharing tea with an old friend. Neither of you realizes it, but it will be the last conversation before life takes you in different directions. If you had known, would you have listened more carefully? Would you have appreciated the moment more deeply? Now apply that same thought to money. Every pound you spend represents time that will never return. Every decision is unique. Every opportunity is temporary. Money becomes less about ownership and more about stewardship. Not what do I own, but what have I been trusted with? This simple shift transforms spending into something far more intentional, but then something unexpected happens. The conversation moves beyond money entirely, because once people become intentional with their finances, they often become intentional with everything else: their calendars, their friendships, their health, their attention. Why? Because awareness spreads. Imagine cleaning one room in a neglected house. Soon, the untidy hallway begins to bother you. Then the kitchen. Then the garden. Order has a quiet way of expanding. The same happens internally. One intentional habit inspires another. Behavioral scientists sometimes call this a keystone habit, a habit that quietly triggers positive changes in other areas of life. Exercise often improves sleep. Better sleep improves concentration. Improved concentration strengthens decision-making. One change creates another. Kakeibo can become a financial keystone habit, not because recording expenses is magical, but because it trains awareness. And awareness influences everything. Imagine someone who has practiced Kakeibo for 5 years. They walk into a shop, an expensive watch catches their attention. 5 years earlier, they might have bought it immediately. Now, a different conversation happens inside their mind. Do I really value this? What am I giving up to own it? Will this still matter next year? Notice what changed. Not the product, not the price, the person. The notebook quietly reshaped the questions they ask, and better questions almost always produce better decisions. Here's something remarkable. Some of the happiest communities studied around the world share a common characteristic. They don't necessarily consume the most. They appreciate the most. Gratitude creates a feeling of enough. Comparison destroys it. Imagine drinking a glass of clean water after crossing a desert. It feels priceless. Drink the same glass while surrounded by endless luxury, and it barely receives a thought. The water hasn't changed. Awareness has. Money follows the same law. A modest home filled with gratitude often feels richer than a mansion filled with comparison. A simple meal shared with loved ones may provide more joy than an extravagant dinner eaten in loneliness. This doesn't mean ambition is wrong. Far from it. Kakeibo never asks people to reject success. It asks them to define success carefully, because the world is eager to define it for you. Bigger, faster, more expensive, more visible. But Japanese wisdom quietly asks another question. What is enough? At first, that question feels uncomfortable. Modern society rarely celebrates enough. It celebrates more. More followers, more possessions, more achievements, more consumption. Yet history tells a different story. Many of the world's greatest thinkers warned about limitless desire. The Stoics believed freedom came from mastering wants rather than multiplying them. Buddhist philosophy taught that endless craving creates endless suffering. Japanese traditions often emphasized balance over excess. Different cultures, different centuries. A remarkably similar insight. Perhaps true wealth has never been about having everything. Perhaps it has always been about needing less. Imagine climbing a mountain carrying 50 kilograms on your back. Every step feels exhausting. Now imagine setting half the load down. The mountain hasn't changed. You have. Many people spend years trying to earn enough money to carry heavier burdens. Few stop to ask whether the burden itself can be lighter. This is where Kakeibo quietly becomes something much larger than a budgeting method. It becomes a philosophy of intentional living, of choosing rather than drifting, of directing rather than reacting, of appreciating rather than endlessly chasing. But then, one final mystery remains. If this philosophy is so powerful, why did it remain largely hidden from the rest of the world for so many decades? And why? Just as modern life became faster, louder, and more distracting than ever before. Did millions of people suddenly begin searching for this quiet Japanese notebook? The answer lies in a growing crisis that few people saw coming. A crisis not of money, but of attention. Because in an age where everything competes for your focus, the rarest form of wealth may no longer be measured in pounds at all. It may be measured in the ability to choose what truly deserves your attention. The crisis of attention, why the richest resource isn't money. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, before your feet touch the floor. Your phone vibrates, a message, a news alert, an email, a sale, a social media notification, a recommendation chosen just for you. Within 60 seconds, your attention belongs to someone else, not because they stole it, because you handed it over without noticing. Now imagine that same morning, 100 years ago. No buzzing phone, no endless feed, no advertisements waiting in your pocket. The day began with silence. A person woke up, and the first voice they heard was their own. That silence has become one of the rarest luxuries in the modern world. And strangely, it may have more influence over your finances than your salary ever will. Because every financial decision begins somewhere. Not in your wallet, not in your bank account, but in your attention. Attention is the doorway through which every purchase must pass. If someone controls your attention, they can often influence your spending. If you control your attention, you regain something much more valuable than money. You regain choice. Here's the strange part. Most people believe they are making independent decisions. Yet psychologists have discovered that tiny environmental cues can influence behavior without conscious awareness. A song, a color, a familiar logo, a celebrity endorsement, a single notification. Each one gently nudges the mind, rarely enough to force a decision, often enough to shape one. Imagine walking through an airport. The smell of fresh coffee fills the air. You weren't thirsty. You weren't even thinking about coffee. Yet suddenly, the idea appears. A few minutes later, you're standing in line. Was it your decision? Yes, but your environment quietly planted the seed. Money works like that far more often than we'd like to admit. This wasn't even the most surprising discovery. Behavioral economists found that people are significantly more likely to make impulsive purchases when mentally tired. Think about the end of a long working day. You've made hundreds of decisions already. Emails, meetings, traffic, deadlines, conversations, problems. By evening, the brain wants relief, not another difficult choice. So it reaches for the easiest reward. A takeaway meal, an online purchase, a luxury coffee, something quick, something pleasant, something that says, you deserve this. And perhaps you do. But here's the important question. Do you deserve the temporary pleasure or the lasting peace that comes from financial security? The answer isn't always obvious in the moment, because the human brain naturally values immediate rewards more than future ones. Psychologists call this present bias. Imagine someone offering you 50 pounds today or 60 pounds next month. Many people instinctively choose today, not because it's the better decision, because the present feels real, the future feels distant, yet every meaningful achievement in life depends on respecting the future. Education, health, strong relationships, mastering a skill, growing a business, planting a forest. None of these happen instantly. They all require a willingness to exchange today's comfort for tomorrow's reward. Saving money belongs to the same family of decisions. It asks you to trust a future you cannot yet see. That trust can feel difficult, especially in a world built around immediate gratification. Imagine planting an apple tree. The first day, nothing happens. The first week, nothing visible happens. The first month, still nothing. Would you dig it up every morning to check whether it's growing? Of course not. You understand that growth is happening beneath the surface. Financial discipline demands the same patience. The results are invisible until one day they aren't. But then, a fascinating story begins to unfold. In post-war Japan, millions of ordinary families faced enormous hardship. Cities had been damaged, resources were limited, money was scarce, luxury wasn't even part of the conversation. Survival came first. Yet something remarkable emerged from those difficult years. People developed habits of careful stewardship. Clothes were repaired instead of replaced. Objects were maintained instead of discarded. Food was respected. Nothing useful was wasted. These habits were born partly from necessity, but over time, they became part of a broader cultural mindset. The lesson wasn't merely spend less, it was value more. Imagine owning only 5 dishes. You wash them carefully, store them carefully, use them with appreciation. Now imagine owning 50. A broken plate barely matters. Abundance sometimes weakens appreciation. Scarcity sometimes strengthens it. This doesn't mean hardship is desirable. It means gratitude often grows when we truly recognize value. There is another beautiful Japanese concept, Shinrin-yoku. It means forest bathing. The practice is surprisingly simple. Walk slowly through a forest. Notice the wind, the trees, the smell of the earth, the sound of birds. No destination, no competition, no rush, just presence. Researchers have found that spending time in nature can reduce stress and improve emotional well-being. Now imagine what stress does to spending. When stress rises, impulse buying often rises too. When the mind becomes calmer, financial decisions often improve. Perhaps that isn't a coincidence. Perhaps emotional health and financial health have always been connected. Think about the last time you made an expensive impulse purchase. Were you completely calm, or were you anxious, lonely, frustrated, excited, trying to celebrate, trying to escape? Emotions rarely stay inside one part of life. They spill into everything, including money. Kakeibo quietly recognizes this truth. That's why it never focuses only on numbers. It focuses on awareness of feelings, awareness of habits, awareness of values. Because changing behavior without understanding emotion is like trimming leaves while ignoring the roots. The leaves grow back, the roots remain. Here's another paradox. Modern technology gives us more information than any civilization in history, yet many people feel less certain than ever. We know market prices in seconds. We compare thousands of products instantly. We read endless reviews. Still, choosing often feels harder. Psychologists call this choice overload. Imagine standing before a shelf with 3 types of jam. The decision is simple. Now imagine standing before 200. The abundance becomes exhausting. Sometimes people leave without buying anything at all, or they make a random choice simply to end the discomfort. Money behaves the same way. Too many options can create confusion. Confusion creates hesitation or impulsiveness. Neither usually leads to wise decisions. Kakeibo offers something surprisingly rare. Simplicity. Not because life is simple, but because clarity is powerful. A notebook, 4 questions, 1 weekly ritual, no endless comparisons, no complicated dashboards, just honesty. And honesty has an extraordinary quality. It cuts through noise. Imagine looking into a lake during a storm. The surface is restless. Nothing beneath can be seen. Now imagine the wind becoming still. The water settles. Suddenly, everything below becomes visible. The human mind works much the same way. When life is constantly noisy, values become difficult to recognize. When the mind grows quieter, purpose becomes clearer. This may explain why so many people discover unexpected things after practicing Kakeibo for several months. They don't merely spend differently, they begin living differently. Some realize they never wanted the bigger house, only more time with family. Others discover they weren't chasing wealth, they were chasing approval. Some realize they don't actually enjoy shopping, they only enjoyed escaping stress for a few moments. The notebook quietly reveals these truths, not by speaking, by listening. Every page asks the same silent question. Is this really the life you want to build? And perhaps that is the greatest question anyone can ask. Because life is not measured only by the money we earn. It is measured by what that money allows us to become. Yet one final story remains. A story that brings together everything we've explored. The history, the psychology, the philosophy, the notebook, the 4 questions, the quiet weekly ritual. It is the story of an ordinary person, not famous, not wealthy, not extraordinary. Someone who discovered that changing a life rarely begins with a dramatic decision. It begins with a single page and the courage to write the first honest line. One honest page. Imagine a woman named Aiko. She isn't famous. She doesn't own a successful company. She isn't a financial expert. No television interviews, no best-selling books. If you passed her on the street, you would probably never notice her, which is exactly why her story matters, because history is rarely changed by extraordinary people alone. It's changed by ordinary people, making extraordinary decisions, day after day. Aiko was 34 years old. She worked hard, she earned a respectable income, friends assumed she was doing well, she smiled often, she dressed neatly, she always paid the bill on time. From the outside, everything looked stable, but appearances have a way of hiding quiet struggles. Every month ended the same way. Salary arrived, relief a few weeks passed, then came the familiar feeling, anxiety. She would open her banking app, stare at the remaining balance, and whisper the same sentence. Where did it all go? She wasn't reckless. She didn't buy luxury handbags. She didn't spend thousands on expensive holidays. She wasn't gambling. She wasn't making outrageous financial mistakes. Yet somehow, her savings never grew. Her future always felt one unexpected away from collapse. One evening, while visiting her grandmother, she noticed an old notebook resting beside a bookshelf. Its cover had faded. The pages had turned slightly yellow. It looked insignificant, almost forgotten. What is this? Her grandmother smiled. Kakeibo. Aiko had never heard the word before. Her grandmother gently opened the notebook. Inside were handwritten entries, small purchases, Monthly reflections, questions, thoughts, tiny observations. It looked less like accounting and more like a diary. Her grandmother ran her fingers across one page, then quietly said, "This notebook never made us rich. It made us careful, and careful people eventually become free." Those words stayed with Aiko, not because they sounded dramatic, because they sounded true. The following Sunday, she bought the simplest notebook she could find. No expensive planner, no premium leather cover, just blank pages. She wrote the date, then paused. For the first time in years, she wrote down exactly how much money she had. The number surprised her, not because it was smaller than expected, because it was real. There were no guesses, no wishful thinking, no pretending next month's salary already existed, only reality. Then she wrote the second question. How much do I want to save? She hesitated. At first, she almost wrote a number that sounded impressive. Then she stopped. The notebook wasn't asking for ambition. It was asking for honesty. She chose a smaller amount, one she genuinely believed she could achieve. For the first time, saving became a promise, not a fantasy. The next few days felt strange. Every purchase suddenly seemed louder. Standing in a coffee shop, she reached for her wallet, then remembered tonight she would have to write this down, not because anyone was watching, because she would be watching. She still bought the coffee, but something had changed. She enjoyed it more. She drank it slowly. She noticed the taste. She realized that mindful spending felt different from automatic spending. The purchase wasn't the problem. The unconscious habit had been. A week later, she noticed another pattern. She ordered takeaway whenever work became stressful, not because she loved the food, because she was exhausted. The food wasn't solving the problem, it was postponing it. Instead of blaming herself, she became curious. What else could help? One evening, she cooked a simple meal instead. Not because it was cheaper, because she wanted to experiment. The meal wasn't extraordinary, but afterward, she felt something unexpected. Pride. Not because she had saved a few pounds, because she had made the decision intentionally. That feeling lasted much longer than the excitement of an impulse purchase. Weeks became months. The notebook slowly filled. Not with perfection, with honesty. Some weeks were excellent. Others were disappointing. There were birthdays, unexpected repairs, moments of weakness, moments of celebration. Life continued. Kakeibo never asked life to become perfect. It simply asked her to remain awake. One rainy afternoon, her washing machine stopped working. The repair cost more than she wanted to spend. A year earlier, the bill would have created panic. This time, she quietly transferred money from her savings. The machine was repaired. She slept peacefully that night. For the first time, she understood something her grandmother had tried to teach her. Savings don't eliminate life's storms. They allow you to walk through them without drowning. Months later, a friend invited her shopping. The newest designer bag had just arrived. Everyone wanted one. The shop was crowded. People were taking photographs, admiring displays, comparing colors. For a moment, the old feeling returned. If I buy it, I'll feel successful. Then another voice quietly appeared, one that hadn't existed before. Or will I simply feel successful? For one afternoon, she smiled, put the bag back, walked outside, bought nothing. Strangely, she didn't feel deprived. She felt lighter, because for the first time, she realized she had chosen her future over a moment, that evening. She wrote only one sentence in her notebook. Today I discovered that freedom sometimes looks like walking away. Years passed, slowly, quietly, without dramatic transformations. A promotion came, not because of Kakeibo, because of her career, but this time, the extra income didn't disappear. It had a purpose before it arrived. Part went into savings, part into investments, part into experiences that genuinely mattered. The money no longer controlled her. She directed it. Friends began asking questions. How did you finally get ahead? Which investment worked? What app do you use? They expected a complicated answer. Instead, she showed them a notebook. Many laughed. Some looked disappointed. That's it? She nodded. That's it. Most of them were searching for a secret. There wasn't one. Only awareness. Only consistency. Only patience. One friend decided to try it, then another. Years later, the conversations changed. No one talked only about saving money anymore. They talked about sleeping better, arguing less about finances, feeling calmer, making decisions with confidence. The notebook had quietly spread beyond numbers. It had changed relationships. One evening, Aiko visited her grandmother again. The older woman smiled as she noticed the familiar notebook resting in Aiko's hands. Without saying a word, they understood each other. Some lessons cannot be fully explained, they can only be lived. Imagine that notebook years from now, its pages worn, corners folded, ink fading slightly. To someone else, it would look ordinary. To Aiko, it had become a map. Every page recorded more than expenses. It recorded choices. Every choice recorded values. Every value recorded the gradual construction of a new life. Most people imagine transformation as a single dramatic event, a life-changing speech, a sudden breakthrough, a miracle. Reality is usually quieter. Transformation often begins with one honest page, then another, until one day you look back and realize the person holding the pen has quietly become someone else. But then one final question remains, not about Aiko, not about Japan, not even about money, a question that has been waiting since the very beginning of this journey. What is wealth? When everything unnecessary has been stripped away. The answer is simpler than most people expect, yet powerful enough to change the way you think about success for the rest of your life. And it is there, in that final answer, that the true meaning of Kakeibo is finally revealed. The quiet wealth that changes everything. Imagine that you are 80 years old. The years have passed more quickly than you ever imagined. The career is over, the children have grown, the house is quieter now. One afternoon, you sit beside a window. A warm cup of tea rests in your hands. Outside, the seasons continue their endless cycle. Spring becomes summer, summer becomes autumn, autumn becomes winter. The world keeps moving. For a long moment, you begin thinking about your life, not the things you owned, not the latest phone you once desperately wanted, not the fashionable clothes that eventually disappeared into forgotten cupboards. Instead, your mind travels somewhere else, to moments, to choices, to people, to memories. Strange, isn't it? At the end of life, very few people remember their greatest shopping day. They remember the dinner with family that lasted until midnight, the unexpected journey that changed everything. The afternoon spent laughing with an old friend. The quiet evening when nothing remarkable happened, except peace. Perhaps wealth has never been about collecting objects. Perhaps it has always been about protecting moments. That is the lesson hidden inside Kakeibo. For more than a century, people believed it was simply a budgeting notebook, but a notebook cannot transform a life. Only awareness can. The notebook was merely the doorway. The real journey happened inside the person holding the pen. Think back to the beginning. We started with a mystery. Why do some people build lasting financial security, while others remain trapped, even when earning similar incomes? Along the way, we discovered something surprising. Income matters. Opportunity matters. Education matters. But none of them matter as much as daily decisions repeated over time. A single decision changes very little. 10,000 decisions shape a destiny. Imagine two rivers beginning on the same mountain. At first, they are separated by only a few inches. Rain falls, the rivers continue flowing. Year after year, the distance grows wider. Eventually, they empty into completely different oceans. Human lives often change in exactly the same way, not through one enormous choice, but through countless tiny ones. One thoughtful purchase, one unnecessary expense avoided. One quiet evening spent reflecting instead of reacting. One page written honestly, again and again and again. People often ask, what is the secret to becoming wealthy? It sounds like the beginning of a complicated answer, yet the truth is almost disappointingly simple. Spend with intention, save with purpose, live with gratitude, repeat. There are no shortcuts hidden inside Kakeibo, no secret investments, no magical formula, no promises of overnight success, only principles. Principles that quietly survive every generation because human nature itself has never changed. We still chase comfort. We still fear uncertainty. We still compare ourselves with others. We still confuse wanting with needing. The world changes, technology changes, markets change, currencies change. The human heart changes much more slowly. That is why wisdom from more than 100 years ago still feels surprisingly modern, because Kakeibo was never solving a financial problem alone. It was solving a human one. Imagine walking through an old Japanese garden. Nothing seems accidental. Every stone has been placed carefully. Every tree has room to breathe. Empty space is respected. Silence becomes part of the design. Someone seeing the garden for the first time might ask, why is there so little here? Someone who understands it asks, why does this feel so peaceful? Life works the same way. We spend years adding more commitments, more subscriptions, more possessions, more pressure, more noise. Rarely do we ask, what can I remove? Yet, freedom often enters through subtraction, removing unnecessary spending, removing comparison, removing mindless consumption, removing habits that quietly steal tomorrow. The result isn't emptiness. The result is space. Space for family, space for health, space for learning, space for generosity, space for living. There is another beautiful Japanese word, ikigai. It is often described as a reason for being, a reason to wake each morning. People often search for ikigai in careers, achievements, recognition, but perhaps there is another side to it. Financial peace creates room to discover purpose. Imagine constantly worrying about bills, debt, unexpected expenses. How much mental energy remains for creativity, for kindness, for curiosity, for service? Very little. Financial discipline does something extraordinary. It buys back attention, and attention may be the most valuable possession any person owns. Earlier, we spoke about the crisis of attention, how companies compete for it, how advertisements purchase it, how technology fragments it. Now we arrive at the final truth. Money follows attention. Life follows attention. Where attention goes, time follows. Where time goes, life follows. Protect your attention, and you begin protecting everything else. That may be the greatest lesson Kakeibo quietly teaches. Not, how do I become rich? But what deserves my life? Because every pound you spend is more than money. It is a vote for the future you wish to create. Every purchase says, this matters. Every refusal quietly says, this matters more. Those invisible votes accumulate until eventually they become your life. Imagine standing inside a library. Every book represents one possible future. One leads to debt, another to freedom. One leads to anxiety, another to peace. Every ordinary financial decision quietly chooses which book you continue reading. Without realizing it, you have been writing your own story all along, page by page, decision by decision. Most people believe wealth is measured at the finish line. The size of the house, the value of investments, the number inside a bank account. Those things matter, but they are incomplete. Real wealth appears in places that cannot always be counted. Sleeping peacefully at night, helping a friend without worrying about money, giving generously, choosing meaningful work over desperate work, having time to sit beside someone you love, watching your children grow instead of constantly chasing another pay rise, walking into old age with dignity rather than fear. Those forms of wealth never appear on financial statements, yet they may be the most valuable of all. History repeatedly teaches the same lesson. Empires rise, currencies change, economic booms become recessions, fortunes are made, fortunes disappear. But character outlasts them all. Patience, integrity, gratitude, discipline, awareness. No market crash can erase those. No inflation can reduce them. No recession can steal them. And those are precisely the qualities Kakeibo quietly cultivates. Imagine that faded notebook once more. Its pages are filled. Not perfectly. Some entries are messy, some months were difficult, some goals changed, some mistakes repeat. Life happened. Yet every page tells the same story. Someone refused to drift, someone chose to pay attention, someone decided that the future deserved respect. That person was never chasing perfection, only progress. Perhaps that is why the method has survived for more than a century. It asks almost nothing extraordinary, only honesty, only patience, only consistency. 3 qualities available to almost anyone, regardless of age, regardless of income, regardless of where they begin. And maybe that is the most hopeful part of this entire journey. You do not need to become someone else before changing your financial life. You do not need extraordinary intelligence. You do not need perfect timing. You do not need luck. You simply need the courage to look honestly at today, because tomorrow is built there, quietly, one decision at a time, one page at a time, 1 month at a time. Long after the latest trends have faded, long after today's technology has become tomorrow's history, long after advertisements have disappeared, the notebook will still ask the same 4 questions. How much do you have? How much do you want to save? How much did you spend? How can you improve? Simple questions, timeless questions, questions that do far more than organize money. They organize attention, they organize values, they organize life itself. And perhaps that is the true meaning of Kakeibo. Not the art of saving money, but the art of respecting the life that money represents. Because in the end, the richest person is not always the one who owns the most. It is often the one who has learned when enough is truly enough. The end.